this much fun.
Oh,
So,
okay.
But that was our goal all along, was to...
Yeah. We really want to have fun doing this, and mostly we do. So, well, welcome everybody. This is Before I Die. This is a conversation about death and dying. I'm Steve Willey, and I'm here with Yanana Rose Zovich. Before I Die is a monthly ongoing conversation about how death invites us to live deeper, richer, and more meaningful lives. And today, on this episode of Before I Die, we'll be talking about life review and reminiscence.
We are joined today by Ingrid Piers. She is a bereavement counselor and also a former colleague of both Steve and I. And Ingrid, I'd love it if we could start out with you just telling us a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do.
Well, I'm 68, and I grew up in two cultures. I grew up in California, primarily in the Bay Area, and I was 2.5 years in Norway, which is where my family is from, and I'm the only one left here. So when I want to go see family, I still go there. How I got into the world of grief counseling, grief management, life review and reminiscence is through the death of my toddler son, Ian. And that happened when I was 31 years old, and he was not quite 2.5. So that put me in a place of taking a look back at my life and grieving for a couple of years, lighter and lighter, but grieving for a couple of years. And then I had just a more robust, enjoyable life. So your introduction, Steve, really was describing my experience of life. And I went on to marry another man and had 29 and a half years with him. He was 25 years my senior. And he died just over 3 years ago, and so I've been hard at it again, going back into life, experiencing a review, a reminiscence of all the things I had enjoyed, and not only those years, but before then. And then I started doing fun stuff. I started looking at, well, now that I know where I've been, what do I want to bring in? So I've been taking climbing. I took a climbing lesson up in Tuolumne Meadows. I went skydiving up in the Monterey Bay area. I took a surfing lesson in Pismo Beach. I went up in a twilight flight of a hot air balloon just a little south of us. And I joined a Rotary Club to increase the volunteerism and meaning in my life, because their motto is service above self. So you kind of have, and I'm very playful. So
Ingrid is one of the more playful and robust people that I know.
Thank you, Steve.
Playful and robust.
Playful,
That's just
playful
such a
and
fabulous
robust.
combination
It
of
is.
adjectives.
100%. Ingrid and I, many, many, many years ago, started a little program at a place that we used to work many, many years ago about life review and reminiscence, and had lots of amazing little experiences. Some of those stories will probably come out today, but this is why Ingrid was the natural choice, I think, to come and talk to us about this, because this is something that we've been really passionate about for a long time. And I know that Yanana, you also do this with every patient in some respects. I mean, the music that you bring to your work also draws out memories and reminiscences and that sort of.
Yeah, music is a really deep trigger for memory, and that can even be with people who aren't speaking much anymore or who have lost memories, and the song that they heard when they were a senior in high school, or when they got married, or when they were a child, can really bring things out. And you can see it on people physically, that how that memory washes over them, and it's like recognition of themselves. and a reconnection into their story. So it's brought, my job is, I'm a hospice musician, so that's kind of my job, is to offer music into the room, and part of it definitely is that it's a memory trigger, and then I just try to kind of receive and listen to the memories that are brought out, which can be very powerful for families if they're around as well. But I really do believe the way that I phrase it to people sometimes is like I'll play a lot of different kinds of songs for people, but I'll try to play something that maybe they had heard when they were a child, because our childhood memories tend to be kind of our deepest, and towards the end of life, those can be the ones that really, really connect. They sort of cut through all the gray, and become clear. And I call it bringing ancestors into the room, right? Mm. So if somebody remembers singing Happy Trails with their parents when they were 5, when they went camping in the cool little trailer out in the desert, that's really potent for them, and that's calling those people into their lives that often have been gone for a long time. So yeah, there's a lot of tricks. I mean, I'm sure there are other tricks to access memory too. I've heard that smell is really really an incredible way to do it. But
what Ingrid, that reminds me, one of the things we used to do as a little guided imagery, which we'll probably talk about a little bit more, but I know we used to access all 5 senses in doing that guided imagery, and every single sense has a connection, has a memory connection. I wanted to ask you, the title of this piece is Life Review and Reminiscence, and I'm always using both of those words or phrases, all of those words together, intentionally. But do you want to talk a little bit about what the difference is between why don't we just say reminiscence, or why don't we just say life review? What are the differences between those two concepts?
Well, the main difference is that reminiscences, we do that probably daily, all of us, because it's simply remembering. Right. And reminiscing has been shown to elevate your mood, to lower your blood pressure, to put a smile on your face, for the most part. Life review brings in another element, because you're looking at the things that you're remembering, and you're looking at it within the context of what's happening to you, or what happened to you, so that you can maybe do some reparative work around it. And a lot of people naturally tend to do some life review as they get older, because it clears out the unfinished business to a great extent. So you prepare for death in a way, naturally, by doing life review. But if you've had some issues in your life, sometimes it's really helpful to have some guidance as you're doing that process.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, and this is sort of inspired by my grandma, who was not a fan of reminiscing, and all of her grandchildren would try to get some details. Like, she had a really interesting life, and she was really old, and we wanted to know the stories of where we came from, and she would kind of tolerate it for about like a minute, and then she would just go, why do I want to talk about it? Why do you want to talk about that? Why would I want to remember that? Let's go shopping. Let's go do something fun. And the implication was life is about now, and it's about what's coming. And that was her attitude. And there's something really admirable about it, but we were all aware that it was really couched in denial,
Right.
And there was a lot of pain in her story. And so I'm wondering, what about, reminiscence is shown to, elevate mood and whatnot. But for those of us who, when we reminisce, become profoundly sad or regretful, or, would you still encourage life review and reminiscence for those people? And when I say those people, I mean probably most people, but yeah.
I would, and I would encourage it to take place in different ways, because, especially in my work, a lot of what you do is go back and recapture what has been so that you know what, and I'll talk about a man named William Worden later, but you have to know what you've lost in order to be able to heal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
You have to embrace pain in order to let it go.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I would absolutely encourage people to do so. If it's truly painful in a way that takes you into a not a healing place, but a spiraling, churning
Like
place.
trauma trigger.
Trauma
kind of,
triggers,
so, yeah.
exactly. Yeah, then you want to do it with some professional help.
Mhm.
But I would still say it's appropriate for everybody to go through that process, because when you come out the other side, it's like you've shed the stress of a lifetime. And it can be hard to die. I mean,
Yes.
we have stories
Yes.
every day about people who have a tough time dying. The ones who seem to have the least problem dying are the ones that have faced their lives, have faced the demons in their lives, and have come to a good place of healing and lightness. And when they come to their death, it's like, okay, we're done.
Yeah. Acceptance.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen that a lot. And one of the things that I say to people a lot who are in some version of the dying process, and I can tell that they're struggling, or sometimes even when they're not, I'll just say, this is really hard.
Yeah.
What you're doing, you're doing really hard work right now. You're doing a good job. How can we help you? And I didn't start doing that, I think, until the last few years. I had a few experiences where I could really tell, like, oh, dying is difficult for people. And often at that point, they're not in a capacity to do, deep life review work, right? They're kind of on their way out. Although I have heard of, I'm sure you guys both know, lots of healing moments of just having a conversation with a loved one, or hearing someone's voice that was estranged, or, the things that we are supposed to say, or that may be helpful to say. I love you. I forgive you. Please forgive me. Thank you. And goodbye,
And goodbye doesn't have to be goodbye. It could be until we meet again.
Yes.
Right.
It softens it a little. But one thing you said was it's hard to do that work at the end,
Mhm.
in the last few minutes or hours. But another colleague from another employer was able to do that work remotely with a sibling,
Mhm.
and to do it energetically, and to do breathing on her own, and do the work on her own, and transfer it in a way, in ways that I don't understand,
Mhm.
but truly respect. And it actually helped, not only her, but her sister, on the other end, visibly relaxed.
Mm-hmm. Were they connected, like, through FaceTime or something like that, or was it?
They
Just
had
entirely
spoken on the phone, or mostly spoken one way,
Mm-hmm.
but they were still a little irritable. The connection was still a little irritable. So then she did it on her own later. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that makes that does make so much difference. I know that, and just to speak to that last minuteness kind of it, even when again, I may have mentioned this in another episode, but when my dad was dying, he was relatively non-responsive, but he was the opposite of your grandmother in that he loved talking about the past.
Yeah.
He loved sharing stories. He loved, all of that, family history stuff. So when he was dying and we were sitting, vigil with him for a couple of nights, one of the things that I was able to do was just tell those stories back to him.
Yeah.
I remember when we did this, and I recall this, and do you remember this? Not expecting to ever have a response from him, but you could tell by his expression or lack of our lack of pain expression when he looked really comfortable, that he was really dialed into what we were talking about.
that's really
So
cool.
it was
Yeah.
it was a really meaningful thing, and I encouraged everybody in the family to do that at some point. So we really had that going on for a couple of days, not solidly, but off and on for a couple of days right before he died. And I think that really helped his dying process along in a peaceful way. I think that really mattered.
Oh, I'm sure it did. Yeah, even a phone call from his grandson in New York. I think the day before he died, Tony, who had been in a breathing pattern of I'm getting ready, I'm getting ready. When I put the phone up to his ear, suddenly his breathing was calm.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. There's a connection there, and you can't break it with distance or
No.
time. That's the beautiful part of relationships. Sort of related to this topic, we talked a little bit when we were preparing for this episode about the fact that we kind of assume that life review and reminiscing period is sort of the provenance of people who have their memory, who have a pretty decent memory, and we might tend to shy away from doing this work with people who have memory issues or dementia or anything like that. But is that necessarily the case? What are your thoughts on life review and reminiscence work with folks who have dementia?
Well, I just happen to have some thoughts on that.
I'd love to know them.
Yeah. So I diagnosed Tony almost 12 years before he died of Alzheimer's. And he had told me to be aware because his father and all of his uncles had Alzheimer's before they died. But I saw his memory ability decline. But most of the time, he could remember past things that went back to his childhood and
Sure.
young adulthood. And it was harder to remember what he had for breakfast. But he gave me as a present, probably 2013, maybe 12. See, my memory. A photo player, the digital photo players.
right.
Yeah. That was his greatest joy the last few years, was looking at all the memories that were coming up from, we had 25 years together. 29 and a half years together. And he loved every bit of what was coming up and flickering. So that could entertain him for hours.
Wow.
When I brought out albums, because not all of the pictures were on the digital player, when I brought out albums, and I'd say, remember this? And then I would talk about what we did, who we did it with, how we felt at the time. And those were some of our most beautiful moments together, was really taking a look back and enjoying it all over again. And reminiscing, I think, therefore, is very easy to do with someone who has memory issues. Life review is a little more difficult. But if you're doing the work, if you're saying, oh, I remember you had kind of a hard time with that, but then, wow, you turned it around. That was amazing. You are really something, right? So that you give them back that sense of competence that they feel like they've lost. And you can show it in all sorts of different ways. And just let them have that sweetness of being seen again.
Yeah, I think that really bears pointing out, that your comment that how you led him through the reminiscence part of it, and obviously the life review part, but even the reminiscence part, I think a lot of us are inclined to say, hey mom, remember, what do you remember about grandma, or what do you remember about this, or framing it in the form of a question. And I think that can be that can be hard for people
It's
sometimes
overwhelming.
and yeah, definitely overwhelming and hard to access sometimes those memories. But with you and Tony, you were allowing, you were kind of leading him by the hand into that
Yeah,
path.
just like you with your dad, you know, Tony had told me all sorts. He told me a lot more than he told his kids about before they were born, and I was able to tell those stories back to him, and you know, that took him way back to a wonderful story where he learned afterwards his mother was standing in the kitchen window laughing, but he grew up on a dairy farm and they had a horse. They had a pony that he tried to get up on. And it was up against the fence, and it would stay up against the fence until he got up, and then it would take its back quarters out. And time again, he led the back quarters back to the fence and tried to get up, and yeah. He thought that was funny all the way to his death.
That's so great. If you're just joining us, everyone, this is Before I Die with Steve Willey and Janana Rozovich. We are here today talking with Ingrid Piers about life review and reminiscence. If you have any questions, please type them into the comments and we will do our best to address them.
Thank you. Speaking of, I'm listening to you. I'm imagining Tony. I'm lucky enough to have known Tony pretty well, and his sense of humor was unparalleled.
Yes.
Also unusual, but I can feel that connection, and I really do. I do feel like I really want to emphasize that about life review and reminiscence, that it's not just about, when we do our volunteer training, we have a little bit of an element of life review and reminiscence in the hospice volunteer training program. And one of the things that we talk about pretty specifically is that this is one of those rare times in relating to people that you're volunteering with where you need to participate.
Yes.
So it's like you can't just sit down and say, hey, we're going to do life review today. Tell me about your history. You know, that's the surest way to close somebody off because it's just too big of a topic. And so we encourage the volunteers to start the conversation by saying, you know, hey, when I was in high school, we went to we used to go to these dances on Friday nights and listen to this kind of music and do these kinds of dances. What do you remember about dancing when you were younger? And so there's a connection, there's a container there already done. Can you speak a little bit about that aspect of life review and reminiscence? And because of our work that we've done, I happen to know that there's a word for that, and it's reminiscence matches. Can we talk a little bit about what that might mean or what that's about?
Well, that's using prompts. It can be words. It can actually be pictures. It can be things. In my grief work, sometimes I recommend that even if they're not going to keep any other clothing, they keep something that they can put on that's close to their nose, because the match with the scent, as you said, Janana, is huge. So, you know, I still have several of Tony's. They don't have a bit of his scent. I mean, I've taken them on the trail, so they definitely have other scents now. But you have the feeling of being wrapped in their embrace, you know, when you put on a piece of clothing that's soft and cuddles you, you know, you definitely go there. And I know we would start some of our sessions with volunteers by talking about something that happened to us, and then ask them to do the same. And the one I started with way long ago, I remember, was tell a little story about you and your knees. You know, and I told the story about scraping my knees and how when I was a little girl, let's say anywhere from 5 to 15, it was a badge of honor if you could scrape your knees and not be a sissy and cry, you know. And so it was like, you would go through contortions not to cry. But everybody had a different story about their knees, and it was, you could just see people coming alive because it brought them to a real experience.
And the first couple of people that in a group like that, the first couple of people that you ask to share roll their eyes and say, I can't remember anything. But by the end, by the middle of, like, let's say there's a circle of 10, by number 5, it's like you're thinking about 100 things that are, and then you're going back around again. No, wait, I remember this. No, wait, I remember this. It's just incredible the way that those connections grow when you start the ball rolling. And it's a much easier way, I think, of carrying on this conversation than just firing questions at people.
Yeah, because suddenly you have a relationship. You were 10 strangers, and suddenly you're all connecting over things that are common. Yeah.
That was a lot of that was lots of fun.
Boy, howdy. Yeah.
I'm gonna just tell one story because I think it doesn't have anything to do with life review and reminiscence, but it was during one of our sessions where we had lots of reminiscence matches that we had brought, physical reminiscence matches that we had brought in a box. And there were things like little toys, candy bars, things that we had brought with us on vacation, or take souvenirs from vacations and things like that. And we were taking these objects around and pulling them out and talking about them with folks in a skilled nursing facility. And so we had a group. I don't know if you remember this, Singer, but we had a group, and I had pulled out this beautiful Mexican woven blanket that was just amazingly colorful, and people were touching it, and they were observing it. We were asking them about, what does this make you think of, or have you ever been to Mexico, or have you ever been to another country? And I brought it over to one woman and put it in front of her, and she looked at me and she went, "Not now, young man. I'm not interested in buying that."
So great.
And I thought, okay, maybe I should start bringing things to sell.
No, it's a great leveler, really, because all of us have eaten all of our lives. All of us have had things to drink. All of us have had to wear something. When you start reminiscing, it brings you together, not only in this moment, but it takes you back to many other moments, which... for the most part, I'm thinking of your concerns that you raised, Junana. For the most part, it's those kind of more neutral experiences that you share, still bring a smile to your face. I'm thinking about, Good and Plenty, or,
Raisinets. But Ingrid used to bring, we would always have snacks at these little gatherings that we would do in facilities. And Ingrid used to bring the snacks, and they would always consist of things like popcorn and those little pink and white cookies. They're not really circus animal. We used to bring the circus animal cookies too, but those, I don't know if you remember those pink and white cookies that are frosted and have the little sprinkles on them. She would always bring those, and invariably people would, they too would spark the conversation. Just the visual food items would start conversations going.
And do you know that those pinks and whites are now just seasonally embedded in dark chocolate at Trader Joe's?
No, I don't need to know that.
We don't want to know that.
We don't want to know that. Take that.
The season's gone.
Yeah. Okay. Good. That's perfectly fine. Ingrid, also, I'm thinking back to what Junana was saying earlier about sometimes the challenging things that come up. How do we frame when we're talking about someone and they're sort of engaging in life review as opposed to just reminiscing, or even deep reminiscing, and those challenging things come up? How do we direct them? Do we encourage them to keep going? How do you sit with that when that comes up? I'm sure that comes up in counseling appointments and that sort of thing too. So how do you guide people through, or do you guide people through in those times and those processes.
I remember a former colleague of ours, Doug Bing, who was the coordinator, what was his title? Bereavement coordinator?
Probably bereavement
Something like
coordinator. Something sounds impressive enough.
Yeah, and I remember him teaching a group of us about the concept of enough, and it was ENUF. And I'll just skip to the F because the F was for feelings. So, well, I shouldn't skip all of those. Emotional, yeah, maybe I should skip them. Boy, it's been a long time. His basic point was that we should encourage people in a non-judgmental way to help them to get to their feelings, because that's where the stuckedness or the healing was to be found.
Yeah.
And so anything we can do to set the stage for feelings, like saying, wow, that must have been pretty big in your life. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, it really was. I started to doubt my abilities, or I felt really proud of myself, mm-hmm. and then you just go, wow, I can't even imagine. Can you tell me what that felt like? And then they go into it in more depth. But it's always important not to get the story on you, mm-hmm. but to use yourself to get them to go deeper. Wow, I can't imagine, but it feels so big. Yeah, it really was. That way, that feeling and that experience comes to a deeper place where they can then see it in more clarity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting to me because you're talking about a situation with a counselor and a person, right? But I'm wondering if that can help serve as some practical tips to like family members, for example, who are wanting to help create some life review and reminiscence with their loved one. Can you give some practical tips to people who are feeling like maybe a loved one would like to do this, and how can they help them? I know we've touched on that a little bit as well, but.
Well, I think especially, let's say a child, mm-hmm. And I'm not saying a child of 5, I'm saying a child of 50, mm-hmm. maybe in this case. You can, and maybe you've heard the stories over and over again, but that's because it's a joy to tell the stories over and over again. So you can just say, I know you've mentioned it, but I just love hearing about how you and Mom met. Or, what was I like as a little girl? Because I don't have any memories till I'm like 3 or 4 or 5. What was I like when I was a baby? And just those little starters, not to pinpoint what they're going to say, but to open it up.
Open questions.
Yes,
right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you mentioned photos and albums and whatnot. Yeah.
And with Tony, for example, with 25 years between us, I could very honestly say, wow, I was at a high school with 400 in my class alone. And you said your high school was a total of 100,
mm-hmm.
What was that like? I can't even imagine having a whole class be only 25 people, not one classroom, but the whole group mm-hmm. being 25 people. And then they get excited, to say, well, it was something, because there were days when we were all late because we had to get the hay in, mm-hmm. right? Because this was a rural community.
Yeah.
So you get to hear embellishments of a time that doesn't exist anymore. Mm-hmm. And that's not always interesting when you're 20, but by the time you're 40 or 50, it's like, oh, tell me more. Mm-hmm. And they love to tell, until the memory's gone, which for some is never until their death. They love to tell these stories of a time that has changed, because from the 20s, 30s, 40s to the 20s again now, unbelievably, our entire culture has changed, not only ours, but around the world.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
When you think about how much people have experienced who were, I think about my grandparents who were all born around 1903. It's weird for me to even say that. 1903, 1905. And what they experienced, before the 90s, I used to think about that all the time. And I used to think, wow, they saw cars, they saw movies, they saw, this kind of stuff. And then now I think that's us.
Yeah.
Since we've been, we've had, all the things that there was a funny meme that I saw just the other day of this guy standing at a desk, and he had a tape deck, a boombox, telephone, a movie projector. He had all these contraptions on a table, and the caption was, "Okay, these are all on your phone now."
Yeah, I was going to say that. Now it's this little thing. Yeah.
I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's what we've experienced.
Yeah.
In addition to all that other stuff.
So many things. What would you say to someone who, maybe someone who's listening, who would like to embark on life review in a kind of a bigger way, and just doesn't know how to get started? Maybe there's someone who's never really done that kind of a thing before. They're not a scrapbooker. They've never been a journaler. They don't have people who are going to be going, "So, Grandpa, tell us all about," like you want to do this for yourself.
Well, one of the things that I used to do when I worked for our first hospice together was to print out pages that I found online that were free online that were cues to what you would be talking about. Like, when I first came to school, right? And all through life's adventures, getting married or finding love or having babies or buying your first car or, everything. Yeah. You can find those online. You can find ready-made books to use. You can also find, I know I've seen it, some of the fall catalogs have just come out for recreation departments around here. And there's life review offerings in there.
Of like classes to take?
Classes to take.
Community classes. That's so interesting.
Write the story of your life.
Yeah.
Was one of the ones I saw. And way back when, and still today, I run classes called A Year to Live online. And that runs the gamut of what we've talked about today, because you do the experiment that Stephen Levine talked about, having done himself. He and his wife did it together, of living a life, a year in their life, as if it was their last. So they lived with the question, is this something I want to do based on having 7 months left to live?
Yeah.
Yeah, very powerful.
And he does talk a lot about life review in that.
That's what I was going to say.
Book, yeah.
He does say, go back. And, I think we really, I say these things. I don't know that everybody says it, but we live our lives today, but we live our lives today with every age we've ever lived inside of us. And so there are parts of us that are robust and healthy, and there are parts of us that are like, oh, God, will I ever get over feeling that way? Because of something that happened, Right. And so going to get counseling, if you start to look at every part of your life, I just started doing that again. If you start to look at every part of your life, even at 68, even having looked at my life from a psychological, spiritual, physical perspective before, there's still things that are little stuck places, And that's when I take myself back. Sometimes I take myself into meditation, but I have a counselor I see about 4 times a year. And that's exactly for those sorts of things where, yeah, I'm pretty together now, but that's not together. So, there are all sorts of ways to get started on it. Some very natural, some just sitting down with photo albums. Mm-hmm. And some, when Tony died, that was just 3 years ago. One of the ways I reminisced, one of the ways I did life review, one of the ways I connected with the fullness of him so that I could process my feelings, and this was a part of the process too, was to write in a journal, but I wrote to him. And I said, these are the things I want to remember. I will never forget this. Boy, I could let go of that. I'm still thinking of those 6 sheds you left me to deal with. All of my feelings, all of my thoughts, and sometimes just inspiration for I have this hard thing I'm going to be facing. Got any ideas, Tony?
Mm.
I started to see one person at one point, and I said, Tony, I wish you were here to give me advice. And I immediately heard, stop wasting your time.
Did you?
Yes.
So great.
More proof that those we love are with us no matter how long ago they passed.
I really believe that, but it's pretty dependent. It's been, in my own experience, it's been very dependent on how much I'm accessing them and talking to them and sharing with them. I do feel that our guides and our ancestors are around us, but we got to tap into it.
We do.
Yeah. That is our responsibility.
Much of my life not tapping into it, and as that's shifted, now I can feel it.
Yeah.
So
life review and reminiscence of Steve's. What 2.0? My grandmother used to say that all of our ancestors were always around us all the time. And I can tell you as a small child, that really traumatized me. I thought I couldn't do anything without being watched.
You got to frame it a little better, right?
Yes, right. Right.
I had the same concern.
But now I'm totally comfortable with it. If you're out there, I'm good on you. Thank you for guiding me. Oh my gosh. I'm Ingrid, I want to just talk a little bit. First of all, I want to ask you, I know you have new projects. I know you have a new project that you're working on. And just based on what I remember you telling me about, I think it has a lot to do with life review and reminiscence and grief. Is that accurate? You want to tell us a little bit about what you're working on?
My new business?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Can I tell a story on the way there?
Sure.
Okay. So I love grief work. I love meeting people where they are and hearing about this person that they just loved having in their lives, who's not here, and they're devastated. And I can honor that devastation without getting sucked into that devastation. And then I can gradually help them to embrace the fullness of their experience and begin to build resilience in. Resilience is a newer trend in grief work. So you actually actively work on both getting sadder so that you can get through it and doing the things that bring you back into life and into a full, robust. I love that word, robust.
It's a good one. Let's use it 10 more times because I'm such a fan. Okay, sorry. My bad.
Just a robust appreciation of life, because there's nothing like comparing it to something hard to make you joyous about a little breeze on your face, to have sunshine coming through dappled trees make a difference and so forth. So it just, that gave you a sense of that. Yeah, last year was hard. In work. And I ended up having so many clients that I was seeing 6 and 7 and a couple of times even 8 a day. And for dealing with grief, that's pretty heavy.
Yeah.
And we had 2 people in a 4-person department leave. One left permanently, and the other left on a maternity leave that stretched to 5.5 months. And I was doing the bulk of the work at the time. And then my colleague ramped up because he has a quasi-administrative role as well. But I was feeling pretty loaded down. Usually I'm able to just kind of gather energy into my hands and go, okay, I'm not taking that home with me. But somehow I ended up taking some of this home with me. And other things were happening. And so I ended up New Year's Eve accepting an invitation to go to dinner and to go to see the symphony at the Performing Arts Center. And there were 8 of us being invited by a lovely friend. And everybody else had a nice time. I had an epiphany. I sat there listening to the music, and the symphony was there, but they were the backup band. There was a group called Genes and Classics, and they are fantastic. But among them is one that was just incredible. And I thought he was a backup singer at first, and the main singer was belting them out. After 3 numbers, he walked off stage, and I went, well, who's going to sing now? And the oldest of the 3 that I thought was a backup singer, he was wearing black top, black pants. He was older. And I had been thinking, isn't that nice that they let this older musician be there? And he took to the mic, and he opened his mouth, and wow, this sound came out. He has an incredible virtuoso ability to use his mouth and his lungs to shape music so that your jaw drops open. He's got to be tremendously conscious, and he has huge presence. And I was just like, awestruck. And by the end of the evening, a number or 2 before they stopped, I had that epiphany. I went, I remember being so light and so present in there. And that's when I decided to reclaim that. And so in the last half year, well, a little more than that, I reduced tremendously my working for the hospice. And I started thinking about it, and I had lots of distractions, but I started thinking about how would a business look and what would I do. And what I do is Zoom grief and growth workshops, including A Year to Live. And I do some one-on-one coaching or counseling. But it's all with this idea of teaching people how to look at grief the way I've found looking at grief has been most helpful since Ian's death, since Tony's death, and others in between. And I'm so looking forward to, I've just begun, but looking forward to bringing that more organic way of getting from the loss to coming to a life that's not the same, but not less. It's actually a greater appreciation of what you have and a better understanding of who you are as you come through it.
Well, we're actually coming up, and that's a great segue for the final little thing that we like to kind of ask all of our guests when we come here, because we're coming toward the end of, unbelievably, toward the end of this hour. And we always like to ask everybody, we're here talking about death and dying, and in this case, we're talking about life review and reminiscence specifically. But Ingrid, do you think that it is possible for us to normalize talking about death and dying in our culture? I know it's sort of just threw that at you out of nowhere, but do you think it's possible for us to just become really comfortable and to normalize that conversation in our culture?
Well, I do that all the time, so I may be the poster child for that. I was as death avoidant as anyone on this planet when my son died. And I was thrust into having to deal with it. And I've come out going, wow, what a gift that was. And people sometimes look at me strangely when I say Ian's life was very healing. It was lovely and warmed my soul. Ian's death taught me everything. Ian's death brought me to a place where, nothing's off limits. Everything's comfortable. Everything can make life better by just dealing with it. And it doesn't have to be dealt with in a gruesome way. You just shine the light on it, open it up, and go, okay, let the healing begin.
That's so amazing. That's a wonderful way
That's
to
the best way
wrap
to
it
wrap
up.
it up.
So good. Thank you so much for being here with us, Ingrid.
Thanks so
Thank you
much,
for
Ingrid.
inviting me.
Golly.
It's been great.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We will be here every third Thursday. Again, this is Before I Die. We stream live on YouTube at Wilshire Health and Community Services and also on Facebook at Wilshire Health and Community Services. You can find us here next month, September 21st. We will be talking with Creative Mediation Programs Manager Nicolina Galante about how to say what we need to say at the end of life, and we hope you can join us.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone.
This is amazing.
That was amazing. Thank you, Ingrid.
Like I said, thank you for inviting me.
Definitely.